According to local councils, it's infrastructure and services such as the Maitland Pool, recycling programs and roadworks which are suffering from government cost shifting. Hunter mayors, including Peter Blackmore, say unfortunately their hands are tied, while the state and federal governments continue to pass the buck with an increasing number of bills.
Well, it's got to the stage where councils can no longer absorb the passing on of responsibilities and the costs involved.
Widespread concern over the ongoing sustainability of local government has prompted an independent inquiry commissioned by the Local Government and Shires Association.
The aim of this inquiry is to show governments, state government in particular, that we do need the additional funding, that you are not passing over the funding to us. You're passing over responsibility, but what about the funding?
Mr Blackmore says rate pegging, which limits councils' general rates charges, is leaving them shortchanged. Many local councils are now seeking a dramatic rate hike to keep pace with population growth, rising insurance costs and deteriorating infrastructure.
When it's restricted to 3.5%, your overall rate yield increase, there is nothing to stop state and federal government then passing on charges in excess of that 3.5.
Jane Goldsmith, NBN News. The L-39 Albatross is the pride of Air Action's fleet. The $500,000 fighter jet arrived in the Hunter Valley a week ago and in about 6 months will make its home in a new hangar at the Cessnock Aerodrome.
It will be, if you like, a museum that you can come and look at, or if you like, you can fly in anything you see there. No, you can't do that anywhere else.
Air Action, which currently operates from Rutherford, will relocate most of its fleet to Cessnock, where the Warbird, vintage and sports aircraft will continue to be used for advanced flight and aerobatic training, along with adventure flights.
It better utilises our airport too. It brings a number of jobs to the area, 3 I think full-time jobs, and on top of that it provides one more thing for tourists to do when they're here.
That other thing could just be a few thrilling minutes on board a T-6 Harvard, a Pitts Special or a Trojan fighter bomber which was used in the Vietnam War. In other plans for the aerodrome, Cessnock Council and the local Rural Fire Service have entered into discussions that could see the expansion of the runway to accommodate large aircraft during major bushfires.
It's really about providing a better facility in this area to fight the fires.
Colleen West, NBN News.
Who knows what's cooking up in these creative adolescent minds? At the Science and Engineering National Grand Challenge, you could almost hear the brains ticking over as some of the country's smartest students nutted out solutions to very involved scenarios. There were the magnificent men with their flying machines, and those designing hulls for boats. Here, students are challenged to build a low-cost yet durable seat to hold a baby which weighs 1 kilogram out of objects such as straws and sticks.
We chose paddle pop sticks mostly because we thought they were the strongest. But it's hard to figure out a way to make them sit that makes them stronger.
And while it may all seem to be fun and games, there is a serious side to this competition. The number of people seeking careers in engineering has been falling in Australia, so challenges like this are designed to renew interest in such fields.
The problem has been in recent years that the students have sort of dropped out of the hard sciences, maths, science and physics, and what this does is give them great enthusiasm for it, and they think, gee, we better keep on with this.
And just for the record, the national tournament was taken out by the teams from St Mary's High School at Gateshead, Lake Macquarie. They recorded the highest score ever in the Challenger's history. Jessica Phyllis, NBN News.
An ankle injury has hampered Labano Haliti's preparation this week, and although he didn't finish training today, the striker's been named to start for the Jets on Sunday.
Unless he comes to me and says he's got a real problem, then, I think he'll train Saturday and be there on Sunday.
The Jets are preparing to host the Mariners for the first time. It's also Newcastle's last home game before a series of away matches.
We want to keep the run going. We had a great result last week away from home, and if you don't come home and back it up with another victory, then I wouldn't say that result's wasted, but it certainly doesn't have the same impact.
One of the A-League's true local derbies, the Central Coast has attracted a cult-like following. Not to be outdone, the Jets have put out a call to arms.
Kids under 12 free for this home game.
In other news, injured Jets defender Andrew Durante was back among his teammates at training today as he recovers from a broken leg suffered in the pre-season.
Finally got my first touch of the ball. It's been a long time coming. I'm still a long way from, joining in with the team properly, but it was good to knock the ball around a bit.
And the other player involved in that sickening tackle, Nick Merger, is also out this week for the Mariners. Adam McKilrick, NBN News.
There wasn't much happening today, but the very arrival of workmen and machinery signifies a big step forward in the polyclinic project. They've begun preparing the site in Newcastle West for building work, which should begin in earnest after the Christmas break. It comes more than 4 years after the polyclinic was announced, not quite the timetable the government promised.
You can be confident it's there in 2006.
That seems unlikely, but builder Ostcorp Abbey Group won't yet say when it expects the facility to be complete. It's set to announce those details next week. The polyclinic is central to Hunter New England Health's vision for Newcastle, set to house medical services from the Royal Newcastle Hospital. It's being built under a public-private partnership with Ostcorp. The health service will be a long-term tenant of the $21 million 5-storey complex, along with a range of other commercial ventures. Natasha Bayersdorf, NBN News.
A casual pass from Russell Hinder set up Mike Helms early on, the beginning of what was a stellar night at the office. 3-pointers flowed all too smoothly for Helms. Aaron Trahair also successful in his long-range attempts. Townsville tried to keep in touch, a job made that much harder with the American import at the Pirates' helm. There were glimpses of promise from the Crocodiles, and when Larry Abney levelled the score, the Townsville faithful cheered like they'd already won. Helms was a marked man in the second half, and when Vanderjagt stood his ground, again the result went the Pirates' way. Trahair found another 3, part of a 27-point haul. Going into the final quarter, Mike Helms made sure the Crocs were no longer in the race, performing well under pressure and continuing to frustrate the hosts. Larry Davidson did his bit as well, part of the Pirates' first win ever in Townsville, a confident Hunter outfit now preparing to meet the Taipans in Cairns on Sunday.
We're purchasing additional computers for the school, as well as some cameras, and also some musical instruments.
The Civic Theatre last hosted an Australian premiere in 1957. 48 years on, the heritage-listed building showcased Gallipoli, providing a homecoming of sorts for two sons of Scone, the Cumberland brothers.
Joe and Oliver's own words and letters, which they sent to their sister Una, I think describe the psyche of the Australian youth, the Australian young men who enlisted in that period.
In this version of events, there's no glorious stories, no boasting of achievements, just raw accounts from both sides told by Jeremy Irons and Sam Neill.
They have worn the enemy down, but I, my brave officers and soldiers, we are all finished.
I thought that I could get a better understanding of what Gallipoli represented and how it was fought and what the conditions they were like if I looked at it through the eyes of ordinary soldiers on both sides.
Dear Angel, let me tell you my plans.
Plans that probably never did eventuate, yet thoughts on paper that continue to live on. Adam McIlwright, NBN News. It's a concertina-like wall called a labyrinth spillway, servicing Grahamstown Dam and ultimately Hunter Water customers.
It's pretty unique. I don't think there are very many of these in Australia. The great feature of this is that we can fit in about 300 metres of spillway in a width of only 150 metres.
It represents a $25 million investment in the dam, replacing the old spillway which couldn't cope with extreme rainfall.
We've shifted about 500,000 cubic metres of soil. We've poured 6,000 cubic metres of concrete, and there's been over 80,000 labour hours in this.
Even though restrictions are unlikely over summer, and with an already healthy supply of water, the bigger spillway will see the dam's storage capacity eventually increase from 132,000 megalitres to 190,000.
Plus, it's going to be able to take a major flood of, say, 1 in 100,000, 1 in a million years, and be safe for the people of the Lower Hunter.
On paper it would seem so, but not until a major flood event will the spillway be given its first real trial. Even before water starts to flow over the wall, 3 weeks of heavy rain is needed. Valve testing will begin next month. Adam McIlwright, NBN News.
This is little Michael Blake. He's just 6 days old and still confined to his humidity crib after coming into the world 13 weeks premature. Thankfully, he and mother Diana are doing well, but premature babies born before 36 weeks into pregnancy are at a higher risk of developing lung and heart complications than other babies. And if they're baby boys, unfortunately the risks are even greater.
Well, if you were to look at particularly early gestations between 24 and 26 weeks, nearly double the number of boys unfortunately die during the newborn period.
Investigating why there is a difference between the sexes and the influence particular hormones have on preemie babies is an Australian first.
We've found there's a difference in their response to stress, and so we're looking at the effects of stress and stress hormones, the effect on the placenta and then the baby in its changeover at birth.
And their research results show premature baby girls stress less.
Girls take on board the message that things are stressful and adapt. The boys carry on regardless.
It's hoped the research will improve survival rates among premature babies, particularly for baby boys.
If we can begin to tease out the reasons why there's a difference between boys and girls right from the point of birth, then potentially we might be able to change the way we look after babies and hopefully make that difference smaller.
Jane Goldsmith, NBN News.
As part of the well-publicised national skills shortage, Australia is also in the grip of a rural skills shortage. The House Standing Committee on Agriculture has travelled across the country, including a one-day hearing in Newcastle, talking about the lack of skilled workers in rural industry.
And the prime thrust of the inquiry is to find out why that is and how we can address it.
While it has to do with young people leaving the land, representatives from Tocal told the Parliamentary Committee there hasn't been enough funding for training in farming and agriculture skills. Meantime, today the national skills shortage was addressed at Charlestown through Rotary's Try a Trade program. 120 Year 9 students were given the chance to try their hand at different trades. It's hoped the initiative will teach students that trades can be a rewarding career path. Todd Nardi, NBN News. Once considered part of the charm and character of wine country, dirt roads are among items on the NRMA hit list. Today it released the results of its audit on Hunter Valley tourism roads. Working on a sample, the NRMA found that Broke, Wilderness, De Beers and Main Road all failed to meet RTA standards.
A pretty objective document to take forward to state and federal to say something's got to be done in terms of our infrastructure, in particular to roads.
The NRMA found the roads were in parts too narrow, with the road surface often being poor. The most urgent recommendation was for the replacement of the wooden bridge on Broke Road. The NRMA says it's hazardous as a truck and car can't pass for 40 metres.
The work we're trying to do today should have actually been done 20 years ago.
The audit has called for upgrades to both state and local government roads. Cessnock Mayor John Clarence says it would cost $26 million to fix all roads that need work in the Hunter Valley wine country. With the area being of national tourism significance, he says the federal and state governments should help foot the bill for all roads around Pecolbin.
This is a growing destination and we have infrastructure growth here that really in time we really have to see those roads improve to entice that tourist to come to the area.
Todd Nardi, NBN News.
After a hectic 7-month stint racing overseas, you'd think the last thing Brock Parkes wants to do is watch racing, but he'll never get tired of this race. The season-ending Supersport event in France saw him cross for his first ever win, and reliving it for family today was much easier than the ride itself.
It's been a long time. I think I've had, I don't know how many seconds, and it's a big change just to go one more step on the podium.
And after initial tests on the new Yamaha machine he'll ride next season, the 23-year-old can't wait.
It's amazing, and it's got everything on paper that we can hope for.
By we, he means Hunter Valley teammate Kevin Curtin, who finished another stellar season against his much younger rivals. Scoring a win at the German team's home race earlier in the season, his consistent year was rewarded with a second place in the overall Riders' Championship.
It's good to have because you push each other to the limit, and you work good together.
Four-wheeled motorsport returns to King Edward Park tomorrow with round 9 of the State Hill Climb Series to start 2 days of action.
The project started with so much hype.
But we would move heaven and earth to see a major port facility of this kind established here in Newcastle.
A now empty promise as Newcastle's multi-purpose terminal is removed from the agenda, with private sector tenders proving unsuitable.
It doesn't surprise me at all that the operators of the handling facilities have said, look, it's cheaper for us to expand in Botany than it is to go to Newcastle. Now, the only way you can change that is with government policy.
If it needs a kick along to get someone on that site, then the government, on behalf of Hunter and state taxpayers, must get up off their backsides and do it.
The Hunter Business Chamber says the decision is a blatant slap in the face after banking on the MPT to deliver 1,000 local jobs. Instead, the state has shifted focus back to Port Botany.
It's committed to $500 million into Sydney, $140 million into Port Kembla and $0 for the Hunter.
A backhand too from within the Labor ranks, with Newcastle MP Bryce Gaudry bitterly disappointed with the government's decision. Although quick to criticise the move, the opposition gave no guarantee today that Newcastle would see a multi-purpose terminal under a coalition government.
We actually want to work with the community to boost jobs and investment.
Not enough for jilted Hunter voters wondering what will become of the Mayfield North site.
We have all invested a lot of time and energy. The fact that it hasn't made it is an opportunity now for us to stop and say, where do we head into the future?
The Premier will visit the region on Friday, an angered Newcastle community awaiting his response. Adam McKilrick, NBN News.
It's a picture postcard venue, but there's little chance for drivers to sightsee while racing up King Edward Park. It's not clear how John Curran saw it, but his first run quickly became a costly spectacle. After coming to rest on the sandbags, the Tirana's next stop was the workshop. He wasn't the only one to get caught in the pinch. But Alan Barlow got away with it a little cheaper, if not a little lighter, after a spring was sprung on the tight turn. With state points up for grabs though, no one was leaving much in the tank. Nor much rubber, as they searched for every second in the climb. With a name built for racing, Brian Ford and his Capri put in some eye-catching runs in his category. For the overall title though, Neil Farr was never really going to be caught, as his bow and hay machine again proved to be the quickest on the day. With a name that suggests otherwise, Rowan Blizzard revelled in the warm conditions of the 54-hole WE Alexander tournament. Following a 5-under par round yesterday, another big score loomed, given the way he began today. While Brent Watson tees up for Longreef these days, the Branxton boy had the blade on song to keep Blizzard honest. But it was the latter who rolled in his final putt of the day for birdie to win by a stroke. There was power overhead and underfoot at King Edward Park today as the Tri-Club Challenge took centre stage. Drivers from Tamworth, Kempsey and Newcastle battled it out for club supremacy, and after lowering his own track record yesterday with a 33.08 second trip, Tamworth's Neil Farr was again setting the pace today. The race for the club point score though was a different story, as everyone was keen to leave their mark. Kempsey member Dave Morrow drove his machine like he stole it, but it was the Newcastle MG Car Club that claimed the 4-round series. Given the weather, this really looked the place to be today. Tare's Lara Reading hoping to go one better than her brother Joel in the Open Women's Final of the Matara Surf Classic. but she too had to settle for a minor placing, with Sally Fitzgibbon from the South Coast taking the title.
It's not a bad stretch of the New England highway, according to police, and locals agree. 2 vehicles crashed head-on west of Maitland this morning, killing the male passenger of the van. The young female driver of the sedan also died at the scene.
We are trying so desperately to bring this road toll down across the state, but the individual needs to take responsibility for their driving.
The 2 young men travelling in the van were best friends. The 21-year-old driver was airlifted to hospital with severe leg injuries.
Probably the only good news we can give you on that is that he's out of the critical list and he's recovering quite well at John Hunter Hospital.
It was 1 year to the day yesterday when 3 young people died in a road crash north of Newcastle. 12 months on, the region is again preparing to mourn young lives killed on Hunter roads. Adam McKilrick, NBN News. They're racing for their mothers, daughters, grandmothers and friends. Nevertheless worthwhile, a 5-kilometre run come walk along the Newcastle foreshore known as the Race for Research.
Yes, the race this morning is very important because it generates funding for research. That means we can take part in international research.
Work which led to a breakthrough revealed in recent days in reducing the risk of cancer returning, a drug called Herceptin. Too late for some, but for scores more, people like those at today's race, it shows very real progress is being made in combating the disease.
More than 400 women in the Hunter region each year newly diagnosed with breast cancer.
These sisters didn't wear their hearts on their sleeves, but a heartfelt message on their singlets.
Our mum's struggling with breast cancer now. She was diagnosed 9 weeks ago and she's fighting it now.
Today's race taking on worldwide significance, part of a massive pink ribbon relay.
Our event has been chosen as the designated Australian event, and there's more than 40 countries involved who are all holding events throughout October.
Also this weekend, a pink ribbon ride for breast cancer from Hexham to Merriwa, an event which has doubled in size compared to last year, testament to the effect cancer has on us all. Adam McKilrick, NBN News.
And number 1 is, are you ready? The all-time Eurovision Song Contest favorite is Waterloo!
In the pink for Australia's Breast Cancer Day,
Some guests at the annual breakfast in Newcastle wore the cause on their crowns. It set an upbeat tone on a day of hope.
We've had a goal for a long time now, and that's a world without breast cancer, and it's realistic.
Breast Cancer Day is all about raising awareness and money to continue the fight. A $500,000 donation from Avon set to make a big impact. It takes the cosmetic company's total donations to the Australian-New Zealand Breast Cancer Trials Group to more than $2 million. The latest pledge will be used on a number of projects.
One that relates to young women, where we're trying to preserve their fertility even if they have chemotherapy.
The plight of younger victims of breast cancer is also being highlighted by this group. 21 survivors are riding Harley-Davidson motorbikes from Sydney to Brisbane, their message carrying plenty of grunt. Natasha Bayersdorf, NBN News.
Franco Parisi is living proof that the more you push, the greater the return. And in his limited game time this season, he's already yielded 2 goals. Last night's match winner, though, must have been his easiest. Coming just 2 minutes from time, it couldn't have been sweeter.
It was awesome. If you see the replay, I got me looking over my head saying, where is everyone? It can't be this easy. So then I've walked it in and just booted it.
Until his strike, it was a tense local derby in every sense. The Mariners had their chances, but Alan Picken just keeps popping up in the right places these days. While Ante Milicic seemed to be everywhere but the score sheet. There were running battles across the park, but you didn't want to get in the middle of these two. As time wore on, so did the close calls, but this looked anything but. Milicic dragged down in the penalty box, and with it went the Jets' best chance. But it was Milicic who then laid on the goal for Parisi just a few minutes later. It could have been even more, with Nicky Carl coming close in the dying minutes, but it didn't seem to matter given the 3 competition points were secured.
It was a night when the eyes of the nation fell on Newcastle. Merryweather's Eric Pillar demonstrating his joy at being home, the first of 9 Bali survivors to be wheeled into John Hunter Hospital after a long flight from Darwin.
We had up to 54 media groups actually on site, and for people entering and leaving John Hunter campus, it was quite phenomenal. We had a lady coming in to give birth and she thought, what's all this attention about?
The intense media scrutiny was just one of the factors the hospital had to account for. It enacted a new disaster plan for the first time. Karen Kelly and surgery director Dr. Stan Chen played key roles in ensuring the patients received the care they needed.
It's really good to see in situations like that how we can mobilise so much clinical manpower very, very quickly.
3 surgical teams were quickly assembled, dealing with tricky shrapnel wounds.
First time we've encountered these here.
The hospital has reviewed its response, rating it highly. Any lessons learned will go into planning for potential future emergencies, like the bird flu.
We've actually been actively planning along with the state government and the federal government for that, and we're using the same sort of framework to work through each of the issues.
Natasha Bayersdorf, NBN News.
No one would question Andrew Johns' decision-making ability on the football field, and while medical advice helped shape today's call, the man himself knows he has to make the right plays off-field these days as well.
I've just got to be smart about it. I'm not 21, I'm 31 now, so
just can't be pushing myself when I'm injured.
It would reassure those at his club, which took its first steps into season 2006 today. The Knights are stagger starting their players' return, with those who are coming back from long-term injuries among those first back on the park today.
It's tough, but it was a learning experience. The fire's back in the belly, so ready to go.
A shoulder reconstruction cut Reynoldson's debut season with Newcastle in half, and despite today's early start, he still feels like the one who has ground to catch.
Yeah, probably till Christmas I'll go a little bit easy on the contact, and then after Christmas really rip in, and then come first trial, she's ready to go.
The entire club will return en masse on November 7. Jim Callanan, NBN News.
Just when he was getting back on top of it all, competing at world-class level, life's reality checks hit Andrew Johns.
I've just got to be smart about it. I'm not 21, I'm 31 now, so I just can't be pushing myself when I'm injured.
That desire to stay at the elite level and help Australia win the Tri-Nations has been undermined by a knee injury that has spread to hip and lower back pain.
I haven't been able to run at my full pace. I've only been at about 80%, which isn't that quick to start with.
Aggravated during last Friday's encounter against New Zealand, Johns doesn't want to be a passenger on the trip to Great Britain.
I've just got to be a bit honest with myself, and if I can't compete, then I'm no good for the team. It's sore just to walk on. Every step hurts, and that's the thing. I can't train with the side, and when I'm out there playing, I said before, I can't run at my full pace, and I'm not making an impact.
His focus now is to help Newcastle offload the wooden spoon next season.
They get it cleaned up now, and it might take a couple of months, but then I'll be right for training, maybe in December or January.
Charles Christian, National 9 News.
After 44 years of service in the Mounted Police, retired Commander Don Ibe is still putting riders through their paces. Inspired by the musical ride at this year's Edinburgh Military Tattoo, Don has modified the routine for these young recruits, and he brings impressive credentials to the job. Not only did Don train and choreograph the horses featured in the tattoo, but also those used in the Sydney Olympics opening ceremony.
But still in all, 120 riders at the Olympics and 6 here, but this 6 gives you a buzz.
It's taken 8 weeks to get to this stage, good enough to record on video, with a copy heading to the UK to be judged in an international competition.
I think it's rigged if they don't win it. They're that good compared to others.
The Disabled Riders Learning Centre at Raymond Terrace has been helping kids for 25 years, relying on volunteers and looking for more. This tribute to the New South Wales Mounted Police, recognised as the world's oldest continuous unit, also honouring its young performers.
When we see the kids all sitting up there, and it means so much for them, and their mums and all the helpers, it is a marvellous thing to do, and actually one of the most rewarding things I've ever done, to work with these kids.
After a loss, Cairns was keen to make amends, especially at home, to Hunter. Mike Helms, though, simply picked up where he left off midweek. As his captain stood tall in the rough stuff, the little men were doing their bit too, as Hunter hung tough against their more fancied rivals. It helped when Helms' radar never strayed far from the target. But it was defence that kept the Pirates in the hunt. And the longer this game went in the hands of the big men, it only got better at the other end of the court. An injured Brad Davidson continued his brave effort through a shoulder problem, while the ring was the only thing under attack as Helms continued his point-scoring mission. A former Taipan, Aaron Trahair, came home to bite his former club. His 19 points, an indication of how this team is starting to hit top form. In his 250th NBL game, Ben Melmoth landed 21. But it's a Mike Helms hot streak that has everyone ready for Brisbane.
Get ready for a little extra noise along the coastline between Newcastle and Evans Head this week. However, there won't be too much to see, as most of the aerial exercise will happen well out to sea. FA-18 Hornets from Williamtown will be the good guys. As part of the Blue Force, they'll defend simulated attacks near our coastline. The bad guys, or Red Force, will be a squadron flying in from the Amberley base at Ipswich.
The responsibility of our forces is to protect the airspace and the assets underneath that airspace.
The East Coast Air Defence exercise is held every 2 years. The purpose? To practice protecting our airspace from invasion and also preventing attacks on vital assets like a shipping port or an airfield.
It's an important part of the maintenance of the air control skills of the pilots and the radar controllers on the ground.
The War Games will be fought for 2 weeks, starting on Wednesday. Aircraft will be mostly taking off between 11 a.m. and 10 p.m. on weekdays. Todd Nardi, NBN News.
School was in, and who better to hand out the tips than Mike Helms? Fresh from giving defenders a lesson in far north Queensland, he arrived home to be awarded the NBL's Player of the Week.
I wasn't shooting the ball that great, so I changed a little bit of my shot and it started falling for me. So I kept it going for 2 straight games, so hopefully I make it the rest of the season.
And didn't they drop? Netting 42 points alone against Townsville last Wednesday, it was the biggest personal haul by any player so far this season. The sweet shooting continued against Cairns, where he backed up with another game-high total of 27. If he wasn't already, he's become a marked man in the league. But that's the way he likes it.
If you're a competitor, I think you want like the best people, the best defenders or whoever coming at you. I mean, it determines who you are as a player.
These students from Hunter Sports High hope they can follow in their footsteps, and under a new mentoring system with the Pirates, it can only help. Aaron Treher wouldn't be a bad one to follow. He'll chalk up his 350th league game on Friday. Geordie Cullen, meanwhile, will suit up for game 150. Jim Callanan, NBN News.
$1.87 million was collected in parking fines in Newcastle last financial year. Council left with a surplus of $358,000. It's this money the Newcastle Alliance wants answers for.
And we'd really like to know from Council where that money is going. We think it's really important that extra money be used to fund the business communities from where it's collected.
There's no such thing as extra money in local government, far from it.
Ms Dorr says the money raised from parking fines goes into a general fund which is dispersed on a priority basis among Council's 150 services. She says there's rarely any left over and has blamed cost shifting from the state and federal governments for adding unnecessary financial pressure to Council. The Newcastle Alliance says it would like to see the money used for projects like the extension of the free city bus service or for a new parking station.
There are active plans for 2 car parking stations in the city centre area, and hopefully there'll be an announcement on one of those in the next few weeks. We still have Throsby Wharf not fully utilised and a free bus into town.
Colleen West, NBN News.
It was sure to be the hot topic at the Newcastle Business Club luncheon, the demise of Newcastle's multi-purpose terminal proposal, which was to provide the region with 1,200 jobs and massive economic growth. Today's guest speaker knows all about those lost economic opportunities, but did her best to remain optimistic about the future.
The MPT, from my point of view, has always been a 2035, not a 2012 project. So therefore, it's not of no surprise that there was not a private sector tender that was able to stack up at this stage.
The Hunter Business Chamber says the state government must now provide infrastructure funding to make the proposal more attractive to private investors and to help keep the plan afloat.
That means thousands of jobs. Now surely that is worth fighting for.
We as a region still have a lot of work to do in relation to the necessary infrastructure that can actually support the growth and economic diversity of the port.
Local MPs are also coming under fire, the Business Chamber criticising them for their lack of action since the announcement.
Look, the silence has been deafening. There's been nothing. So what we're after our local MPs to do is to join with the Business Chamber and the Trades Hall Council and lobby hard. We need to see a better outcome for this region.
The government will spend $140 million on Port Kembla and $500 million on an expansion of Port Botany. Jane Goldsmith, NBN News.
That season-ending Achilles injury has cost Jane Altschwager plenty. Besides a chance to lead Hunter into the finals, it's also ruled her out of Commonwealth Games selection. It's those disappointments, though, that saw her today reject an offer to join New Zealand club Canterbury, to instead focus on fighting her way back into the international arena and domestic competition with the Jaegers.
We had every chance last year, and unfortunately it came down to percentage, and so that's going to stick with us this season coming up, and we're going to make sure that we make those finals.
It's music to her coach's ears, with Maria Lynch planning for the same thing. There are 7 new faces in her 16-strong squad for 2006, including former Canberra data Emma Costa. She must try and fill the big shoes left by retired defender Ali Tucker.
They're huge shoes for her to fill, and I'm sure Emma will do it in her own inimitable way.
The biggest shock, though, was the omission of 2-time Player of the Year Katie Walker, with the midfielder squeezed out with a view to developing younger players.
Katie has brought some very special qualities to the team, and they're things that you can't measure, and we're certainly going to miss that side of things.
Altschwager, meanwhile, continues her recovery and should be running again by Christmas.
It's no secret that eating a lot and exercising little can lead to some extra padding. And it's this that's been largely blamed for the region's less than average report card on health. A snapshot of the health of New South Wales has revealed that almost half the women in the Hunter New England area are overweight or obese, significantly more than the state average.
The numbers reflect the trends that we've seen for the last couple of years, but the numbers themselves are still a concern for us because they suggest there's a large problem in the community that we need to address.
While the number of overweight or obese men is on par with the rest of the state, health professionals warn it's still too high. In fact, 6 out of every 10 men is classified as being too heavy.
There's an association between overweight and disadvantage, and we need to make sure that we look at solutions which are relevant to rural areas, and they may be different solutions to those in the urban areas.
The Hunter New England Area Health Service is about to embark on a childhood obesity program and is also hoping to look at strategies for adults, including the promotion of better food choices and incidental physical activity such as walking to the shops or taking the stairs. Colleen West, NBN News.
It's been a city united in grief, a city rocked by the October 1 tragedy in Bali. Among those personally affected, 24-year-old Adam Williamson, who lost his mother Jenny. He says the care, compassion and support of fellow Novocastrians has been truly overwhelming.
Oh, it's unbelievable. We got told when we were in Singapore what it was like, but you sort of can't get a grip until you actually get here. And just for us to get down to the junction, do some shopping, you go there and pick a couple of things up, 10 minutes, and you're there for an hour and a half.
Adam's father Bruce, his mother and his 16-year-old brother Duncan were all in Bali at the time of the attacks. A plant operator at Port Waratah, Bruce is now home and undergoing treatment for a shrapnel wound to his right eye and burns to his left eye.
But they've said with a few more operations he should be able to gain 80% to 90% in his left eye and anywhere from 50 to 80 in his right eye. So fingers crossed that'll happen.
Tomorrow, the Williamson family will come here to Newcastle's Christchurch Cathedral for Jennifer's funeral, celebrating her life as a wonderful mother, wife, daughter and friend.
Oh, she was a great mum, always there if you needed her, and yeah, just whatever you needed, she'd do anything for you.
Adam hopes tomorrow's service will create some kind of closure for his grieving family.
It's been a pretty hard time trying to organise funerals and whatnot, but we'll be happy to get it, see the back of it, and then sort of start moving on with our lives and everyone can say goodbye.
Jane Goldsmith, NBN News. It was history in the making, according to the Trades Hall Council, the largest demonstration ever in the Hunter, with 35 venues filled with people. At Panthers Newcastle, 2 auditoriums were packed out and downstairs wasn't much better, standing room only as protesters watched the ACTU's satellite telecast. Then they poured into the streets, headed for the New South Wales Industrial Relations Commission. It's a chant which took on special significance today, a united message of frustration and opposition to John Howard's workplace reforms. It's estimated that more than 5,000 people joined the demonstration here in Newcastle alone, forming part of the biggest protest in Australia's history.
It's far surpassed the peace protests of the Vietnam era and of the recent era too, so it is obviously an issue that is really burning in not only unionists but non-unionists in the community at large.
Their main gripes, concerns about changes to the unfair dismissal laws, minimum wages, penalty rates and sick leave.
People have probably heard of the old master-servant relationship. Well, it's back big time once this legislation goes through the Senate.
And while the PM isn't expected to back down, protesters say they'll get square at the next federal election.
Howard's notorious for being arrogant, and he will continue to be arrogant. He will pass these laws, but we will see this through right to the next election.
Jane Goldsmith, NBN News.
The way they conduct themselves at times makes it very difficult, and there's an expectation at rugby league games that people have to give the referee a fair go and give the person standing next to them a fair go.
We can make it much bigger for everybody, not just you, him, or me. Everybody gets to see a much better show. The undercard will be more exciting also because it's a bigger venue, more people can come.
Passenger flights ended at Belmont Airport in April when the owner of Aero Pelican International Air Parts transferred all services to Williamtown. IAP wants Lake Macquarie Council to buy the airfield at a purchase price based on residential land values. The Land and Environment Court is now being asked to decide whether the sale is necessary now or can be delayed until a time in the future.
The first judgment will be whether or not we do have to acquire it. If the court says we do, then the next test will be under what conditions we have to acquire it, and that comes under the Just Terms Compensation Act.
It's the second decision on a sale price that will determine whether council buys and allows flights to resume.
And if we can acquire the site at what we consider to be a reasonable price, then we will certainly be trying to find an operator.
Meantime, environmentalists are angry with the state government over a plan to sell 188 hectares of former Pacific Power land in Freeman's Drive, Cooranbong. Mayor Piper believes the sale should be delayed until an assessment is completed on the neighbouring Centennial Coal Awabba open cut proposal.
They certainly are appealing to others in the community to look at biological banking, and I think that this is an opportunity for them to look at that, but I don't believe that the two proposals should be being considered at the same time.
Gary Blair, NBN News.
No bridle, no saddle. Instead, a few simple words is all Jean-Marc Imbert uses to direct his prize stallion, Yellow. The 37-year-old Frenchman has been riding since he was a toddler and says training a horse is no different to training a dog. It's all about communication.
When I want to go at the left, I show at the horse where is the left.
Jean-Marc is currently touring Australia as part of an equine-based spectacular and is joined by another of the world's top horse trainers, Jose Mendez, who was today making himself right at home in Newcastle. Jean-Marc is also enjoying some hunter hospitality, along with his 3 steeds, Yellow, Java and Nikito, who travel with him around the world.
A horse, when he walks with me, he needs to be my friend. Look, a horse, it's beautiful, it's big.
Colleen West, NBN News.
A relatively young recipient of the Hunters Sport Administrator of the Year award, Frank Barrett was quick to share the accolade.
My award wouldn't have been there without the volunteers, and we've got tremendous volunteers at the Newcastle Rugby League, and I really do think they have to share the award as well.
He has been at the forefront of local league issues for 3 years, sits on a range of boards and panels, work labelled as outstanding by the Hunter Academy of Sport.
Look, to be honest, I was blown away. I didn't have any idea that it was up. I don't know who nominated me, but I'm grateful that they did and very honoured to get the award.
Full-time professional coach of the year went to Mark Jones from Women's National League side Northern New South Wales. In all, 8 gongs were awarded, acknowledgement for those people who drive local sport. Adam McKilrick, NBN News.